Good morning, everyone. This morning, we're joined by Alex Sens, Interim Dean of our Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, and the Sakopoulos Kounalakis Professor of Hellenic Studies in our Department of Classics. He's the author of 6 books and has been a distinguished member of our Georgetown community for nearly 30 years. So Alex, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us for this conversation. Let's jump right in. Your scholarship focuses on Greek poetry of the late classical and early Hellenistic period. It's a focus on poetry. It's an engagement with earlier literature. As we get started, would you share a little bit about what brought you to your field of research and the questions that have been most central to your scholarship?
Sure. Well, thanks, Jack, very much. It's a pleasure to talk to you. So I should say that I came to my field of research sort of by accident. So I had actually written a PhD dissertation that focused on the classical period on a comedy writer from the 5th century called Aristophanes. And my colleagues, my soon-to-be colleagues, hired me. They were searching for someone who was going to work in Greek tragedy. So I was already a remove from what they wanted. And when I arrived, by the time I arrived, I had in my spare time, sort of between finishing my dissertation and graduating, I had started reading around, and I came across this text that I found fascinating. And it hadn't been much liked. And so I thought, well, why is this that this hasn't been much liked? And I started unpacking some of the assumptions about it. And I discovered just sort of interesting things that emerged from exploring it as a text that was engaged with the literary tradition. And that just took me in a different route. And so the text that I work on, the poetry I work on, are really the product of a period after there's been a real epical shift where the world has just changed. The Macedonians have come down into Greece and they've sort of effectively eliminated the independent polis. And by the time the generals who survive after Alexander have fought it all out, we have centers of Greek culture in really new places, in places like Egypt. And so the poets who are writing in Greek in places that are removed from the old Greek homeland are really just struggling to find their place in the tradition. In some ways, it feels very modern, almost postmodern, that they're trying to figure out who they are in the literary landscape, but also in the cultural and social landscape. So that to me just seems so modern and so appealing that I've made the last 30 years of writing sort of about that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Now, a few years back in 2017, you were recognized with the President's Award for Distinguished Scholar Teachers. You are known for being so deeply committed to your students. Could you talk about your approach to teaching, your work with students as they engage with what are sometimes difficult and technical classical texts?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Jeff. Well, first of all, thank you. It's a few days belated, but thank you for that award. It meant a lot to me. It was an honor of my life to get that. And I think the way I think about teaching is that most of my students are not going to be me. As much as I would like them to do the stuff that I do, I'm not teaching them to replace myself. And I remember so acutely when I first started learning Greek as a teenager. That's a different and longer and complicated story I can tell you another time. But I started learning Greek. It felt like a world was opening up to me, and I remember as a young person feeling so immensely proud of the accomplishment of mastering or beginning to master stuff. So I wanted to always convey that, even when I'm doing Greek language with my students. I jokingly tell them that I'm not teaching them so that they can go to graduate school, but so that they can, avoid having a terrible midlife crisis, and so that they can think about what they accomplished and go back to the Greek texts and not make any foolish decisions to destroy their lives. But then I also, think that these texts raise interesting questions about what it means to be a human being. And so when I teach texts in English, I'm constantly just trying to remember they're not going to remember specifics in 5 years after they're graduating. They're going to remember the big picture. And so I try to get them to think about the questions that these guys were asking, right? They're asking, what does it mean to be a human being, right? What are our responsibilities to other people? How do men and women interact? What's our relationship to the divine world? And I always bear that in mind and try to focus on that and try to meet the students as much as I can where they are.
Thank you. Now, your most recent book, Hellenistic Epigrams, was published late last year. Tell us a little bit about this project. For those who might not know, what are Greek epigrams?
Yeah, so Greek epigrams, it's a fascinating kind of transformation of a poetic form. So throughout antiquity, really the oldest form of literature we have are of verse literature that we have are poems carved on stone, and they go way back into the Archaic period, and they have a fixed metrical form, and they're sort of they're generally very short, and they have a pragmatic purpose. And in the Hellenistic period, this period after the death of Alexander, poets started taking that pragmatic poetry and converting it into a canvas for literary expression and experimentation. And so I've been interested in that for 20 years. I wrote a book on a fellow called Asclepiades of Samos, who was one of these early innovators in this genre. And then this book is it's part of a series that Cambridge University Press publishes, and it's designed sort of both for graduate students, advanced Greek readers, and for scholars. So it's an edition of the text with a commentary, and that has allowed me to really expand my sort of range of study of this genre, which I worked on for so long.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, in February of last year, you began your current service as interim dean of our graduate school. Could you reflect on your experience, especially as we have responded to the challenges presented by the pandemic, and as we've worked to strengthen collaboration with our graduate students? What values have animated your leadership of the graduate school?
So, first thing I would say is that it's a slightly different gig than I thought I was getting, but it's been really rewarding. It's been and mostly, it's been very gratifying to be able to help navigate through a really difficult period. And I think, all of us have felt this acutely, but the graduate student community has felt it. They have a different set of needs than undergraduates do, and it's been really been rewarding for me to try to work with them to help them navigate this difficult time. But the graduate school is an interesting institution in the sense that it has a kind of it has a wide-ranging mission of supporting students across the university, and so it's not, it's in some ways a central service for graduate programs and graduate students, and so that has been an interesting negotiation, and it's I think the principal value is a willingness to collaborate and to not think in silos, and that has really animated everything I've done at Georgetown.
Now, you've served many roles at Georgetown throughout your years here. It includes your previous service as chair of our Committee on Rank and Tenure, and previously you served in the graduate school as Senior Associate Dean for Program Development. As you think about your service, what advice would you share with our faculty as they're beginning or in their first years of their journey at Georgetown? How has service helped to shape your university experience?
So first of all, I should sort of reflect on my role on UCRT on the University Committee on Rank and Tenure, and say that I recognize that as a young person, you do not want to overburden yourself with service. But I also, I made a decision fairly early in my time that I wanted to be part of a place where I felt like I was a participating member of the community in the fullest sense. And some of my richest experience, I've loved my teaching and scholarship, but honestly, some of my richest experiences have been in working with other colleagues that I otherwise wouldn't have worked with. So I've really loved the university service, and I would say that I feel richly repaid by the university. For what I've given, I've gotten everything back, I think. So it's been worth it. One has to be careful, of course, if one's starting out, but I've found it rewarding. The other piece of advice was one that was given to me by two dear friends when I got tenure, and Leona Fisher from the Department of English and Joe O'Connor, who hired me into the classics department, is now retired. And they said when I got tenure, they said, "Okay, now it's time for you to think about what kind of colleague you want to be. Do you want to be the kind of person who thinks about what the right thing to say is, or do you want to just say what you think?" And that has been a kind of mantra of mine as I as I have done the things I've done at Georgetown.
I can't imagine two better mentors at that point in your career.
No, that's right.
Alex, it's been a joy to be able to spend this time with you, and I want to express our appreciation for everything that you mean to this place. In closing, is there a message you'd like to share with our colleagues?
Well, I'm back on campus today. I haven't been here much. I was doing recordings for commencement, and I ran into some friends. I ran into the provost, whom I've seen only on multiple Zoom screens, and it meant so much to see human beings face to face. I can't wait to see you all in person as we return to something like normal in the near future.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, thank you for joining us in this conversation. We're so grateful to you for your scholarship, your teaching, your commitment to service and leadership, and for all of your many contributions to our Georgetown community. And I look forward to being with all of you again soon. Take care of yourselves and take care of everyone around you. For every Hoya, everywhere.